Hello. Let's just wait a little bit for people to join. Um, but it's great to be here. First live between 21 Analytics and EUCI with Viara. I will let Viara introduce herself. I'll just wait a little bit for people to join. Yep, very good. So maybe a little bit about me. I'm Hannah. Nice to meet you all. Nice to see you guys here. I am the lead regulatory engagement at 21 Analytics. I'm doing all the parts about travel rule, where we help CASPs being compliant with the travel rule when dealing with self-hosted wallets and also when dealing with counterparty VASPs. And I'll let Viara introduce herself.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you for organizing this. I'm Viara. I'm part of the European Crypto Initiative. I'm a senior policy lead with the initiative. We deal with everything related to crypto regulation in the European Union, which starting from MiCA and going through all the AML and ending with basically who knows where now that the crypto industry is part of the financial industry. And yes, I'm a privacy lawyer by trade, by passion. So anything that's related also to compliance and to this collection of information in the context of blockchain and crypto is very close to my heart.
Yes, we had a pleasure to work together on the consultation regarding the EBA guidelines for the travel rule, which was super interesting to add. I would like to maybe to start with one of the most challenging topics everyone asks us about, everyone is curious about. We had a little bit of uproar sometime this year about is there any ban on self-hosted wallets and all that. Um, Transacting with self-hosted wallets. Can you introduce a little bit what the regulation says, Viara, and what the guidelines say, and what a little bit about our work on the consultation in that regard?
Yes, with pleasure, because that's at least from my perspective and from what it seems from the perspective of the whole industry, is one of the most important and most pressing topics. Basically, what's going on with the so-called they were called different things during the drafting of the transfer of funds regulation. They were called unhosted wallets, self-hosted addresses. So there has been a lot of variations in the terminology, but basically all those terms mean wallets. What the crypto industry understands simply as a wallet, one that you control. And isn't connected to, basically isn't controlled by a crypto asset service provider, if I have to use the terminology used by the markets in crypto assets regulation. So from the drafting of the transfer of funds regulation, there has been a lot of instances where the industry, for one reason or another, was saying, oh no, now because of this regulation, the European Union is trying to ban wallets, unhosted wallets, self-hosted wallets, which was never the case. It's true that crypto transfers are dealt with differently than ordinary transfers, but in no way there is a ban of transferring between two wallets. The only thing that is different in the approach is that there isn't a minimum threshold for basically the collection of information that basically needs to go together with the transfer, which is what differs from traditional transfers. But at the end of the day, whenever there is a unhosted wallet or a self-hosted wallet and transacting in any way with a CASP, there needs to be certain information that needs to be collected. And what's interesting, of course, Hannah will share more. I hope you share more about the details about this information. But that's the first step. Basically, each transfer, if it's a crypto transfer, there needs to be this information collected without a threshold. But there is a threshold of €1,000 when it comes to self-hosted addresses, in which case the owner or the controller of that transfer of that wallet needs to be verified in a way. If you are transferring from a wallet, you need to the CASP needs to verify that you either own or control that wallet for each transfer over 1,000. So there are a lot of interesting ways for that to happen, which Hannah, please share more about the technical means. But that's basically what us as users we're going to experience in
Mhm.
our day-to-day transactions when connecting our wallets to a CASP and receiving or sending transactions.
Exactly. I think it's important to note that this works in both ways, right? Either sending in or sending out. And you need to collect the data about the user regardless of any amount. So anytime a CASP is dealing with a self-hosted wallet, you need to know the data that is also required for travel VASPs, travel transfers between VASPs. So the name of the originator, the yeah, some other information regarding the transfer, like the amount, the address, etc. However, when you are dealing with transfers above 1,000 euros, as Viara said, you need to request a proof of controllership or ownership of that address. How can that be done? Well, that's a challenge we have been dealing with in Switzerland for several years, and now the EU has put in very specific points on how to do that. They have, I believe, 5 ways to do it. They talk about unattended verifications, which are you can refer. I can afterwards add this regulation, but you can refer to the regulation on the guidelines on customer verification from the EBA as well. But what they mean is just any verification of the address that does not include CASP employee. So, for instance, a screenshot would be something that it would be in accordance with this. Attended verifications are which could be something that we have seen in the markets is VASPs, like jumping into a call with the customer and asking them to prove they control that wallet address. So showing them at least some information and making sure that the customer is the person who they are talking to. Those are not great in terms of one reliability, or yeah, that can be easily faked, right? If we're talking about a screenshot, and not great for user experience if you need to ask every customer before they do a transaction to jump in a call with you. Then they have sending of predefined amounts and set by the CASP. This is also very much known as a Satoshi test, where the customer will just agree with the CASP when to send a specific amount, a very small amount from that address, and then when they perform it, the CASP has it's pretty okay to know that this person was the person that the CASP was talking to. Therefore, they have proven they control the address. Finally, they have request the customer to digitally sign a message with the wallet. This is what we mostly suggest, highly suggest our customers to use, because that's way more straightforward. Customers are not interrupted in their transaction. They would, as every wallet has a private key, of course, and they are able to sign message with that. When they do that, they have proven that they control the wallet address, or therefore they can spend the amounts from that wallet address. Therefore, they are the owners of that. And then they do also add an other specific technical means, as long as they allow for reliable and secure assessment that the CASP is fully satisfied that it knows who owns or controls the wallet address. that opens a little bit for other technical measures. But as far as we've seen, those are the ones that CASPs have been able to kind of come up with and rely on in terms of wallet ownership. I think, yeah, go on, Viara, sorry.
No, thank you for this. I'm really curious how those would be implemented in practice. Because we already have these guidelines, but it's probably important to also mention that they will not be applicable before the application date of the transfer of funds regulation. So, going a bit back, and probably I will use this opportunity to also talk about a bit of the work of the EUCI, and also how we kind of followed the drafting of the transfer funds regulation. But in order for a regulation to be shaped and to become applicable, it goes through a lot of steps, goes through negotiation process, goes through this consultation with the industry, including organizations such as the EUCI. And this led to its finalization last year, and its application date on the 30th of December this year, which is the same date when the MiCA part about CASPs, crypto asset service providers, would also be applicable. So there were already in the consultation some questions. Okay, what's going to happen, because we do have this grandfathering clause that allows for a bit of a later application of some of the CASP requirements under MiCA for CASPs in Europe. So how would that be aligned? So it's very interesting to also kind of see and think about these other overlaps that are gonna be quite crucial, because no regulation exists in a vacuum.
Yes.
But there is
And
also this period in the guidelines itself, this special CASP, not quite grandfathering clause, but also in a sense a period of time during which CASPs will have to prepare better. Can you share more about that?
yeah, I think it's important to mention that the ABA guidelines answer this question very clearly about the MiCA grandfathering. They say it's not acceptable to not comply with the travel regulation by 30 December of 2024. So that's when it actually kicks in, regardless of the grandfathering periods, specific grandfathering periods in local jurisdictions. But it does add this transitional period up until July 31st of 2025, where CASPs should be doing everything they can to transact with travel to transact and comply with the travel rule when dealing with other CASPs mostly, but they should allow until 31st of July. If the systems are not perfect, if there is still some technical limitations, CASPs are allowed to, by then, use technical systems that are not perfect for the transfer of information. However, collecting, holding, and making available the information to the counterparty is still required by the regulation. So this transitional period is just while technical systems are aligned, and there is, of course, as most who are here already know, the issues of interoperability between protocols and solution providers, and this 6 months, or at least this 1 year from now, hopefully CASPs are already looking into complying with this regulation. Uh, Lets CASPs already kind of test out and try out, even though the systems are not fully interoperable or working as desired. This, I think, was the way of the EBA to deal with a little bit of the comments in terms of limitations of travel providers in terms of interoperability. What I think is important also to mention in that case is that although we push back a little bit on the high risk of self-hosted wallets, I think, Viara, we can expand that a little bit later. Uh, what is important to mention is that most CASPs in the world are still not doing travel rule, and CASPs in Europe will have to do it by 30 December. What we've seen in the market is that, and also in line with this regulation, is that when you're dealing with self-hosted wallets, it's easier for you to comply with the travel rule because you do not depend on a counterparty to play the game with you. Actually, when you're dealing with self-hosted wallets, you only need, as we said, to have your customer to give you the information that you require, and then from there they can transact to other destinations as they wish. So what we do suggest some companies that cannot find their counterparties in their networks they are part of, or that are struggling with having all the counterparties play the travel game, uh, transacting or allowing your customer to withdraw to self-hosted addresses could be easier to comply with, considering that you're only dealing with your customer. However, talking about the high risk part, we have seen in the draft that the self-hosted wallets were considering high risk, and I think it could be interesting to jump a little bit on what we talked about in their consultation, and how it ended up on the final guidelines, the topic of transacting with self-hosted wallets for VASPs, what the EBA recommends VASPs to take into account.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the practical kind of clarification of indeed how sometimes using a self hosted wallet can make it even easier and safer, perhaps in some cases. Because that definitely wasn't the overall over aching sensation and um, belief that the co-legislators were sharing when still drafting the transfer funds regulations. There were different attempts to limit the use not just of self-hosted wallets but also of different say anonymization techniques. So what at the end of the day ended up in the transfer funds regulation, which is the so-called level one regulation. So the guidelines is its purpose in general is just to expand on what is already in the regulation. It shouldn't be kind of expanding the scope of the regulation itself, but should be providing more clarity to what's in there, because the EBA is the authority that is more prepared to go into the details. But basically what they're saying is that in the regulation itself, that by July 2026, another deadline, the Commission and the EBA, after consulting the European Banking Authority, shall issue a report addressing the risks posed by transfers to and from self-hosted addresses. So they're saying, okay, we consider that there might be some higher risks, but we still need to go deeper into that and to analyze that. But even though that's the case, and there isn't this certainty of the exact risk level, and as Hannah, you mentioned, we even gave arguments in that direction in our response, saying, hey, it's actually not that risky. There are circumstances that make it less risky. They're less risky in comparison to other traditional means to transact. But even though that's the case, they're still in the guidelines itself saying that, yeah, actually using self-hosted wallets addresses is considered to be a risk factor that needs to be evaluated by the CASP. But something that was changed in the guidelines due to our response and other responses that were in the same vein was that initially what they were saying is that basically all transfers needs to be to and or from self-hosted wallets, self-hosted addresses needs to be identified. So this was going against what's in the level one text, and instead it was later, based on that feedback, changed to verified, because there is a big difference between actually identifying and verifying transactions and the meaning of that. So in a sense, we are yet to see what else is going to come up in 2026, the latest. But it's definitely something that currently we already as a industry see a different treatment based on this belief in the higher risk posed by crypto assets and the transfers of crypto assets that in most cases do not represent the reality.
Yeah, I think maybe just to expand on this, they consider self-hosted wallets addresses as a risk factor. Um, you should also, anyone who is interested in this, should have a look at the EBA's money laundering and terrorist financing risk factors guidelines, where they expand a lot on that. But in summary, it puts being transacting with a self-hosted address just in the same level as transacting with CASPs that are in sanctioned or high-risk countries, or with persons that are in countries with and CASPs in countries where there is no licensing or travel rule requirement. So in general, what we see in the guideline is that a CASP needs to know before transacting is if they are dealing with a self-hosted address or with another CASP. This makes total sense in terms of practical implementation, because this changes depending on who you're transacting with. This changes what your obligations are. So if you're transacting with a CASP, then you need to get in touch with them in any way, through a protocol, through a network, through some CASPs you even use email, and or if you're transacting with a self-hosted wallet, then you just need to collect some information and you're done. So in that regard, we see also the EBA guidelines pointing to the guidelines on money laundering and terrorist financing risks, on what the CASP needs to know before transacting with another address. So you are entering in a relationship with that CASP, and therefore a lot of your obligations due to the travel rule and to transactions with this counterparty will impact on how you deal with this counterparty. So that's why we also talk about a lot the importance of counterparty due diligence, and being really having a relationship with your counterparty businesses, because in accordance with the guidelines, it's also depending on if your counterparty is responding to you, or if your counterparty is failing to respond in several ways, or if your counterparty is sending you inaccurate information or missing information, you need to take steps and have procedures and processes on how to deal with that. So this is also one of the on the guidelines, one of the things that they ask you to have before 31st of July, procedures and processes on how to deal with CASPs that are not um, doing the travel with you, either or responding or sending actually the information with the transfer. Um, in terms of choosing protocols, they do have also um, forwarding to another guideline from the EBA about ICT, security risk management, outsourcing. This should also all apply to your choice of how to do travel in terms of your system. But as Viara said, we look forward for the more in-depth uh, information from the EBA following the practical implementation. Also, one point that I think is important to mention is that they talk about requesting additional information from a CASP. So if you are dealing with a CASP that you're talking to them via email, which we see a lot of firms do it, disclaimer here, please use encrypted email and not send this kind of information on a plain text everywhere in the world. But when you're doing that, you should use the same channel to request for further information. And also, your CASP should have 3 days to respond. And if they fail repeatedly, then you should either think about issuing alerts, really just suspending your relationship with that CASP. Uh, you have to find technical ways to do that, um, or and also ultimately informing your supervisory or issuing really a file informing that they have been repeatedly failing to inform you with of the data. Maybe we just have a look at the questions. I don't know if I can see if there are any.
If not, maybe we can go a bit more in detail of the data points, and basically what can. But yeah, you mentioned already the failure of CASPs. But what happens if there is missing information, and in general,
Yeah,
um,
it must. The CASP
yeah,
must inform that to the counterparty immediately. How we do it is that we allow the VASP to align on the travel rule data before the transfer actually happens. If both sides are okay, they say okay, and then the transfer actually happens. We believe really um, takes off the rejection part and returning part of transfers out of the way, because we see that this is a very important problem for CASPs, is how to deal with this rejected transfers. If you receive transfers that have no information or have missing information or wrong information even, how to deal with that. The guidelines go into detail on that, talking about if you need to return to the originator. They bring a little bit of clarity there, because we've seen some cases like how to do that, so how to go ahead, and does that even open a new transaction that we need to have travel data for? No. So the EBA guidelines are clear on that. You need to reject and send the transfers to the back to the originator. It does not constitute a new transfer of funds or transfer of crypto assets that you need to have travel information for. But we really believe that the best way to deal with that is just allowing the transfer of data to be aligned before you go into the transfer of crypto, because then you avoid this type of problem. And I
perhaps it's
think,
also important to mention that apart from like the negative consequences, there is also a positive one when it comes to whitelisting unhosted wallets, self-hosted wallets. So that's also a possibility. Basically, a self-hosted wallet owner wouldn't be required to each time when using this wallet with a CASP to go through all the same verification procedures. So there would be this whitelisting basically taking place, where after that you would be fine for at least until a certain change in the circumstances occur. So that is also something positive. And another positive addition to the guidelines is also the further clarification, although logical to some extent. It's always good to have it written down that indeed gas fees and transaction fees would not amount to the amount of €1,000 transaction, but instead they would be checking the exchange rates, and also when it comes to connected and different transfers that are actually connected to one another, the rules of that apply to payment service providers would apply. But it is clearly put there, written black and white, that gas fees would not be calculated into the amount of 1,000, which I think, especially in certain periods of transacting, is a very good kind of. It's a
yeah,
big relief.
yeah, that was a question, I think, as well from the consultation. And it's good to see there. And in terms of whitelisting, not about self-hosted addresses, but talking about whitelisting CASPs, the same. Also, there is a lot of benefit for CASPs doing that, because important point is just that CASPs must know a lot about the transaction when doing the transfer. So when they ask about the risk factors, when they talk about risk factors, they add self-hosted addresses being one of them. They also add a lot of about the country where the or the CASP is stated, or about the originator, and transfers from or to accounts that have some suspicious behavior before using your KYC provider. So all of that really adds to your need for whitelisting your counterparty business. Yes, a very important point about the self-hosted address amount, and also that they point out that the amount should be the one when transferring in, the amount that was transferred in, and when transferring out, of course, the amount at the rate when that was asked for. And yes, I think that is mostly the important bits. I'm not sure that I see any questions here. Any other important point that we may have missed, Viara, that comes to
Nothing
your
comes to
attention?
mind at the moment, but I'm sure that should people have questions, they can just ask them either under this video as a comment, or can get in touch directly with either of us. We would be more than happy to provide more information. Also, we will link the guidelines, also the transfer funds regulation, as comments below. So
Yes.
yes, have a look,
Yeah.
let us know if you have any questions, and as always we'll see how those would be implemented in practice. So it would be very interesting to also see projects such as 21 Analytics doing their part, important bit of actually ensuring compliance, and just seeing how different projects would tackle this new regulatory challenge
Yeah.
that will at the end of the day just make the ecosystem safer.
Yes. Thank you so much, Viara, for coming. Yeah, important point is just try to keep this data very well protected. As crypto user myself, I would I would prefer this to be taken very, very seriously by countries, by CASPs, because we are talking about personal information and tying them to wallet addresses. So you need to be sure that you're safekeeping that data very, very well, preferably within your own company, and not being yeah, transparent about that. Thank you so much for being with us here, Viara, and hope we have another one soon. See
Thank you
you.
so much for the invitation, and yeah, see you.
Bye.